Good afternoon, Earth. This is Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, Mexico, working on oil painting memories present. Alright, yesterday off camera I detailed quite a bit and added in this extra scene here that's expanding off of the wall and floor of this other scene, so this kind of makes it a sort of a folding sort of a set of rooms there. And right now, the next, possibly the last of the elements to go in is a figurative or thematic segment of the composition will be this wall right here. This looks like a pair of tits, and I'm going to have a distorted woman's face right there with her torso making up the lacerated floor. And then after that, I'm just going to start detailing, integrating, and smoothing all the dimensions into each other, bringing background more out into the foreground where needed, pushing foreground into the background more where needed, and just overall integration of all of the scenes into one composition. So that could take a bit, but here we go.
On this planet was the grain tower at Jericho. It was a storage tower for grain, and it was constructed so that you could carry rocks on your back up to the top of it in order to drop them on other human beings who were trying to lay siege to your grain supply. So, put very simply, psilocybin, for the period when it was plentiful and in frequent use, suppressed ego, suppressed the sense of unique or individual identity, and substituted for it a kind of extended communal sensibility. And we, to this day, idealize this sensibility. But for 7,000 or 8,000 years, it's been a dream, because hard on the heels of agriculture come walled cities, kingship, stratified classes, warfare, mass murder, mass graves, all of these things, and nothing has changed since. We have only elaborated the efficiency of our maladaptive behavior through a few wrinkles like the phonetic alphabet and materialism and that sort of thing. Well, what's the point of this? Simply that now we are in the terminal phase of this maladaptive mutation. We have perhaps 50 years, perhaps 30 years. It may be too late right now. Nobody knows the real consequences of the ozone hole. Nobody knows what we're going to do with all this toxic waste that's being generated. Nobody knows how we're going to control our population without stepping on the toes of extraordinarily powerful and fanatical religious hierarchies that rule the lives of hundreds of millions of people with an iron hand. Nobody knows how we're going to gently untie ourselves from the albatross of civilization without going extinct. But I suggest to you that the importance that I think most people here feel about the psychedelic issue is because this is not about instant psychoanalysis or better sex or getting in touch with Native American lore or any of those things. It is quite simply the pharmacological means to medicate out of ourselves the lethal style of existence that we have created for ourselves. As straight a person as Arthur Koestler, certainly no stoner, suggested in a book called The Ghost in the Machine that we are evolutionarily so hardwired for murder that the only way we will ever be able to create a caring civilization is through pharmacological intervention on these ancient reflexes. Well, essentially I'm suggesting a more complicated version of the same thing. You know, we have many problems: toxic waste, population, misuse of land, suppression of other peoples and classes. But all of these problems, to my mind, can be reduced to a single problem: the overexpression of the individual ego. That's what it is. That's why we have worked ourselves into this impossible situation. And the only solution, I think, is to go back to the last sane moment the human family knew before we set out basically on the road to hell. And the last sane moment was about 15,000 years ago on the plains of Africa. In other words, before the invention of agriculture. We have to look very seriously about what was different in that lifestyle that we can institutionalize and inculcate into a global civilization of 4 or 5, 6 billion people. Obviously, we can't advocate orgies at the new and full moon, not with epidemic sexually transmitted diseases raging around the planet. However, I think we can take, for example, a hard look at the fruits of monogamy, and most importantly, I think we can take a very hard look at the cultural implication of psychedelic use. Most people talk about it in terms, and I do as well, in terms of individual right, human liberty, but it's a social obligation, I think, to try and find strategies to manage and erode the control of ego. A very powerful factor in global civilization that is pushing us all toward rack and ruin is materialism. The grip of materialism on the modern imagination has been achieved by convincing each and every one of us that you're nothing except for the things that you have. Psychedelic users know that the greatest riches lie right here. That's the counterpoise to Kmart and Costco and Yves Saint Laurent and Enzo Ferrari and all the rest of these people who trot out these toys that cause us to feel inadequate and incomplete unless we possess them. So I see the psychedelic thing as literally a fight for the life of not only the human species, but all life on the planet. Capitalism is not a user-friendly system. Capitalism will continue to extract metals and cut down forests and enslave third world populations until there is nothing left to cut down and nothing left to dig up. The psychedelic issue, you know, it's always been such a puzzle to me why they attack it with such invidious fury, the institutions that seek to suppress it, because it's not like hard drug addiction. It's very, very manageable and mild in its effects on society, unless there is a kind of unconscious realization that the entire society is pinned together by a cult of ego, and that the psychedelics somehow erode and call into question this cult of ego. And so what I would leave you with tonight is simply the idea that I don't see us as involved in some kind of minor civil liberties issue where we are adjusting our right to experience yet more pleasures or more insight for our own self-satisfaction or aggrandizement. But very simply, we have to choose between this archaic, shamanic, non-materialistic, magical, female-oriented, Gaian lifestyle or we choose death for ourselves, our children, the rainforests, the oceans, everything. And, nowhere is it writ in adamantine that intelligence shall be preserved by the evolutionary process. 95% of all species that have ever existed on this planet are now extinct. You can see them, the hecadonts, the plesiosaurs, the great sauropods. All of these creatures are now simply locations in various shales and the stratigraphy of the geology of the planet. And it's, I think, incumbent upon anybody who feels any portion of this message to take a stand. It's not a stand for human liberty. It's not a stand for something as Western and recently invented as intellectual freedom or something like that. It's literally the life of all life on the planet depends on how we human beings come to terms with this maladaptive situation. Because you see, during the period when we were under the aegis of the great goddess and communicating with her through her sacred plants, that's when we invented community, loyalty, self-sacrifice, ethics, a sense of moral justice. It wasn't developed at Ur or Sumer or Babylon. I mean, those places outrage a sense of moral justice. It was developed in the archaic, shamanic, nomadic, Gaian phase. And our nostalgia for that, it should be honored. It isn't an illusion of the human mind, as some historians have wanted to suggest, to believe that older is better. It is, in fact, an authentic memory of the last sane moment that we ever knew. And, you can commit suicide if you like, but making that decision for your children and their children and the children of all the other species on the planet is a crime for which there isn't even a name. So appalling is its magnitude. So that's really all I want to say. I mean, I could, pound the pulpit and claw the air, but I think that this is the single most important issue at large in the world today, and people such as ourselves who by good fortune and chance and synchronicity find ourselves on the fringes of this issue, or if agreeing in any small part with what I've said here this evening, there's a moral obligation to put this out in the marketplace of ideas. Millions of people, billions of people need the calming assurance that comes from experientially verifying the existence beyond the grave. And I think that at the end of history, this is what will happen, that very shortly the instability built into the system is going to transform material existence beyond all imagining. The culture, the global civilization is dying. There are too many problems. They're accumulating. You have to be blind to not realize that this is really, in fact, the end of the road. And that it is, the ozone hole, the toxic pollution, the toxification of the ocean. We can't pretend that these things are easily reversed by simply recycling or something like that. No, instead of this clutching to keep it all like it is and say, oh, no, please, no future, please, no future, we have to say, okay, deep breath. It's like that first wave of psilocybin when you feel it sweep over you, or ayahuasca, and you realize, my God, here it comes. I've done it this time. Well, we've done it this time, folks. We have been planning human mass suicide for 15,000 years. Not a moment was not dedicated to this goal, and now it's upon us. And it's a cause for great rejoicing. We will go off into hyperspace. The planet will heave an enormous sigh of relief. And if it can come back from an asteroid impact that leaves nothing larger than a chicken standing around, then I dare say in 50, 60,000 years, the glaciers will run, the jungles will restabilize, the ocean will cleanse itself, and as the I Ching says, no blame, no blame. The metaphor that we have to keep in front of ourselves, you all know the cliche, ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny, right? Do we all understand what this means? It means it's something that embryologists in the 19th century created, and I think it's fairly profound. It's that a fetus, a human fetus, recapitulates the entire history of evolution on this planet. It begins as a tiny one-celled organism, it becomes a fish, it becomes a reptile, it becomes a mammal, it becomes a human being. But the part of the recapitulation of phylogeny that we've ignored is extinction. For 1,000,000 years, we have been afloat in the gentling amniotic ocean of the planetary environment. Imagine the fetal crisis of birth. You exist as a fetus inside your mother. Food is delivered through the umbilical cord, oxygen delivered the same way, endless space, weightlessness, the dream, paradise. All needs are met. And then something begins to go wrong. The walls close in. And you begin to be propelled into the birth canal. Strangulation. Death. The fetus must know at that moment incredible fear. Everything is going to be destroyed. The world is ending. Yet, how could the fetus at that moment imagine Hieronymus Bosch, or nuclear physics, or global politics, or starflight, or any of these things? We are now in the birth canal of a new ontological order of human existence, and the walls are closing in. There's no going back. The amniotic ocean, the unpolluted, endless frontier of a game-rich planet, forget it. We've been in the birth canal for 10, 15,000 years, and now we're approaching transition, the most violent part of the birthing process. And all you can do is scream unless you have some superordinate knowledge of what is going on. The shamans in the rainforest, shamans among us, and as a goal for each of us, must act as the midwives to a new order of existence. There's no going back. We've burnt this scene to the ground. And the womb is stretched, the womb is traumatized, but it can recover. But the child and the mother must be parted. Again, the metaphor of pregnancy. If a pregnancy is somehow if the birth is not smooth, if the child is not parted from the mother, toxemia sets in. And then you have a real crisis. The life of the mother, the life of the child, everything is in danger. This is the real problem. I don't think we've reached that place yet. I think that we'll go fairly smoothly into hyperspace, but I think the emergence in the last 20 years of masses of human beings taking psychedelics, masses of human beings talking about getting in touch with the spirit, talking about a new shamanism, an archaic revival. This means we are very, very close to seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And it's a radiance, the meaning and the depth of which cannot be told, because we are, after all, being born into a higher dimension. But if we believe in the dynamics of nature, if we believe in the rightness of being, then there should be no anxiety. There should be no alarm. This is what psychotherapy and shamanism and all these things exist for, is to spread the truth about the situation so that we don't clutch and we don't hold on and spread panic and hysteria. And that's what I've learned from psychedelics.
To get to the spirit, I can't see for myself, I can't see bypassing the heart. But anyway.
Well, don't you think that the collapse of everything familiar is going to open our hearts? I mean, look at what AIDS has done. Look at what the information we have about the rainforest, or the pictures of Somalia. I mean, the most open-hearted of us open first. But before this is over, every one of us will probably bury the dead and walk through, hell. And it will open the heart. It can't fail to open the heart. I mean, when a friend dies in your arms, maybe the first time it doesn't work, but the second, the third, the fourth, and we are going to get it sooner or later. And it's bigger than all of us. I mean, it's just so big. And it's always been there in miniature in the phenomenon of our own death. But we don't look at that. But, if you will contemplate your own death, your heart will open. I mean, the truth that I've learned from psychedelics, to put it into bumper sticker form, if that's the way to think of it, is this is the hardest truth there is. This is the distillation of 50,000 years of nomadic hunting and orgies around the campfire and rockets to the moon and the whole thing. It can be summed up in a single phrase: nothing lasts. Nothing lasts. Everything is changing into something else. Heraclitus said this. He said, "Panta rhea," all flows. We flow into this world, we inhabit it, and we move on. Nothing lasts. Not your career, not your fortune, and finally not even your own sweet self. Everything is replaced. And if we can open ourselves to this by the heart, by the mind, there's all ways, then we will find the dignity to, and this is not about being born in the generation at the end of the world. This is something that would have worked at every moment in history. After all, Heraclitus lived 2,500 years ago. This is the truth of true maturity. Nothing lasts. Every time I take a trip or eat a fine meal or make love or visit an art gallery, I feel the transience of it, and that enriches it. That's the heart dimension, is the poignancy of knowing that this too shall pass. This too shall pass. The earliest piece of poetry in English is called Deor's Lament, and it begins, "9 winters we Elfbiau held Marenglenberg. That now is gone, this too shall pass." It was a song sung by a poet to a king somewhere in France in the 10th century or something like that. Everything is in transition, and the material body resists this truth, because the material body understands that if it passes, then it will be replaced by something which it can I think this is what psychedelics teach, that nothing lasts. And if we can incorporate that and live it, we will live every moment to its fullest. The people who are HIV positive, they get to walk around with the knowledge that nothing lasts, and in a way they are privileged, because after all, any one of us could be bitten by a snake today and die, or have a tree fall on us, or be run over by a bus. We would have missed living in that heartful dimension where you know that you too will move from the scene and make way for something else. William Blake said, nothing is lost. Nothing is lost, and I really believe that. I think we only move on. But William Blake, this isn't the opposite thought, but it's an adumbration of it. He said, what is the price of experience? Is it bought for a song or sold for a dance in the street? No. It is purchased with all that a man hath. His children, his wife, his home. And that's the truth of it.
Alright, unfortunately that eats up most of this segment, so I'm going to go ahead and stop it and splice another one onto this, because I'm into a pretty good rhythm here. So, stand by for take two. Alright, take two.
And as I say, the personalities, UFO cults, are swirling without a doubt. I mean, these are not people that you would enjoy spending time with. I've seen UFOs, so I don't feel like I'm excluded from talking about it. But they always make it too simple, the witnesses. And the whole problem with the occult generally is that it's all too simple, and people claim too much knowledge. People say, well, on the 11th level, the princes of the fifth chakra are involved in working with the violent energy of the this. How the hell can anybody say this kind of stuff? I mean, it's just theosophical battle garb. The whole point is that we don't know exactly what's going on. The thing I like about psychedelics is that if you're not on them, weird shit isn't happening. I mean, I don't want to go into a boundaryless world where I'm channeling this and channeling that and manifesting something else. People say, can't you achieve these states on the match? Well, yeah, you can if you're crazy as a shithouse owl, but I mean, the whole point is that these states are not invading ordinary consciousness. I mean, if I woke up some morning and discovered in my morning meditation that I could trigger the EMT flash, I'd get professional help well before breakfast. You may be sure. The goal is not to access these places on the match. I mean, that's nuts. It's like trying to fly by flapping your arms. They're just as real when you access them on DMT as when you access them any other way. I don't know what it is with my rule, which is Occam's razor when you're doing you study logic, is hypotheses should not be multiplied without necessity. In other words, don't be weirder than you have to be based on what you know and experience, because that's weird enough if you're doing your homework. So to decide that you're going to believe in some fantastic occult cosmology is to essentially throw away your freedom. I'm a pragmatist. I don't like the ideology. Any ideology. I mean, I don't like, there are obviously toxic ideologies, fascism, once I asked the mushroom in the Amazon, I said, why are you dumping all this stuff on me? Why me? And it said without hesitation, because you don't believe in anything. And that's what it requires, I think, is an empty vessel. If you carry to it beliefs about fairyland or divas or etheric bodies and all that, that will simply inflate your pre-existing belief and confirm all your prejudices, and you'll be no better off than some other form of middle-class smugness. What you have to do is try and empty yourself of belief and say to it, be what you are for yourself. And when you do that, with the mushroom, there's an enormous organ tone, and black draped curtains begin to rise. And after about 45 seconds of that, you say, that's enough of what you are in and of yourself. Let's go back to the dancing mice, the rolling panties, the birdies, and the bright as the precursor or the usually phrase, and also the theological implications, but also as the writer at the end of time we talked about in 2012, and the magnet effect. Could you go into a little more depth? Yeah, I have to give a product warning here. You get two things from me. You get what you could have gotten somewhere else if you went to libraries or read books or did something. In other words, I'm just a teacher, and I tell you what you could find out somewhere else. And that's what we've been talking about here, exotic as it may seem. The other thing you get is my conclusions about these places. And those are simply my conclusions. They have no force. There's no moral or intellectual imperative to line up with me on these things. But as a psychedelic voyager, I keep trying to create a meta-theory. I keep trying to understand what is happening. And I really have come to believe, this harks back to what I was saying at the beginning here this morning about how the psychedelic experience is an experience of higher dimensionality. That what that boils down to is an awareness of the future. And the future is not what we think it is. The future is not something which extends endlessly away from this moment into a dimension that has not occurred yet. The future is finite. And this is a big surprise. I talked a little bit last night, we all operate under the scientific myth of the Big Bang, which says that the universe sprang from nothing in a single instant. That seems to me highly improbable and difficult to assess the odds, I grant you, since it only happened once, but highly improbable that out of a perfect dimensionless vacuum, a singularity of such complexity as this universe could spring into being. If we're being logical, it seems to me that if you need the singularity to anchor your cosmology, it's much more logical to place the singularity not at the beginning of the universe, but at the end of the universe. And to see process not as the unfolding of the consequence of cause and effect following cause, but to see the universe as a process being drawn towards something, being drawn toward higher states of order, being drawn toward completion, complexity, concreteness, and this is what we have to precisely with the foundation for life, life the foundation for higher animals, the foundation for thinking, civilized beings, and so forth. I really believe that what's happening on this planet is a kind of birthday process. Biology is the process of spirit, and the entire earth is pregnant with the gestation of spirit, and it is perhaps even willing to rupture itself in order to bring to birth this higher form of organization. And in the same way that birth, the process of the gestation and birth of a child, takes a long time, but it's very dramatic in the last few hours. That's where the action is, because that's when the child moves into the birth canal, and convulsive tremoring begins, and the uterus expels the child into another dimension. I think history is the birth canal of spiritual transformation. That the reason we are such strange creatures is because we are neither spirit nor simply animal. We are the fetal form of a new ontological order. And it takes about 25,000 years for the process to come to completion. And it starts with just the seed, the building of a fire, the enunciating of a word, the forming of a thought beneath the beetle brow of some distant ancestor who raises their face from feeding for a moment and has this descent of higher order into their sphere of cognition. But once the book is in, it begins to build technologies, languages, philosophical points of view, inventions, migrations, gene swarming, religious teachers, techniques, it all begins to feed into itself faster and faster and faster and faster. And now we have reached the short terms of the spiral. We are being shaped by a trans-dimensional intellect of some sort that lies ahead of us in the future, that casts an enormous shadow across the lower dimensions of space and time that we inhabit. And in our more primitive cultural form, we just call it dawn and say, we are being propelled toward God, we are being pulled into God nature. I don't think that this is the God who, in Milton's phrase, hung the stars like lamps in heaven. I can't conceive that it could be that God. I think it's the God of biology. That biology is in the process of transforming itself on this planet, and that history represents the final crisis. And look where we are. I mean, imagine the life of...
All right, mixing up a little translucent blue to go in this area here, so that road will be kind of disappearing into an ocean or a sea of tears.
All needs are being met. There is simply the great oceanic oneness of being, and then growth and growth. In the same way that we expanded across continents and began to clear forests and build stone cities and build observatories, growth, growth, growth. Finally, it's all used up. And the uterus, the womb is filled. It's no longer this dimension of endless freedom. Instead, it's a tiny, cramped, constricted space. The walls are closing. This is where we are. The walls going back. So we all know the Grateful Dead song about you can't go back and you can't stand still. If the thunder don't get you, then the lightning will. And that's where we are. That's what the 20th century is. It's the awareness that we have eliminated the option of centuries of a human future. It's all now going to settle in the next few decades. Whether or not this species goes extinct or goes hyperspatial. In other words, whether or not this experiment in the birthing of spirit is to end in stillbirth or a successful parting of mother and child, the earth emptying its womb, heaving an enormous sigh of relief, and us then going off to whatever grand and glorious destiny the spiritual imagination can find for itself in hyperspace. And so the chaos of the 20th century is the chaos of birth. I mean, if you had never seen a human birth and you were to happily come around the corner and be confronted with this, it's like a medical emergency. Blood is being shared, organs are distended, there's moaning and groaning. It looks like a problem. You have to really make a leap to faith to say, how beautiful, new life coming into the world. This is how we do it. Make place for the new order. Well, that's what we have. We've used up 3D. We have begun the long path down the birth canal. We are supplicating. The walls are closing in. We cannot imagine what lies beyond us. On the other hand, a fetus in the birth canal, how can we ever know that it will grow up to be airline pilot, research scientist, fashion model, or whatever? Those are whole realms of categories that don't even exist in the world that we inhabit. And I think that what psychedelics are about, and what shamanism is about, is getting behind the screen and learning what the flaw is, figuring out what human destiny means. I don't think we should despair. I think we're moving on. Everything we know is going to be shared and lost. This is the psychedelic truth of life. Nothing lasts. Not your enemies, not your lovers, not your fortune, not even your own dear self. Nothing lasts. So the place to be is in the felt experience of the moment, with a model of the whole that feeds optimism and light back into your daily activity. It's an incredible act of hubris to believe that we are not part of nature's plan, to believe that we have somehow escaped from the yoke of natural obligation and are just off on our own bender of some sort. I don't think that's true. Granted, we are weird. We are the weirdest animal species on this planet, but octopi are weird, and praying mantises are weird, and sperm whales are weird. We just claim a certain domain. We are the trigger species. We are the blinded ones. We are the species that downloads ideas into matter. We are the species that lives inside history. We live inside our ideas. We fabricate cities and international airports and national governments and languages and religions. And then we inhabit these things. The soft monkey that we are is not the essence of our humanness. This vast coral reef of technology and information transfer devices and paved highways, all this is the human world that we have created. We have downloaded ideas to three-dimensional space, and we've discovered that three-dimensional space can only take so much of this downloading structure out of the imagination and into
the world. And I think now we're going to the place where the ideas come from. And the shamans, for 100,000 years, have looked out over the landscape of time and seen history and seen that it comes to an edge. And beyond that steep edge beats the oceans of transdimensional eternity. And we are now looking toward that. You cannot remain forever. It's inconceivable that we could try to manage human society on this planet for another 1,000 years. We have raised expectations in people that cannot be met. If we extract every block of petroleum from the planet, if we fabricate all the metals into junk, we still will not give everybody a middle-class lifestyle. So something else is happening. We are preparing for a leap into hyperspace. You know, the French have an expression which means to step back before you leap. This is what the 20th century is. The world of the Edwardian gentlemen, the mathematical dominators, the print heads, the object fetishists, all that, that's the 19th and early 20th century. Since about 1925 on, we have been circling around the problem of hyperspace, the unconscious, the Jungian archetypes, the psychedelic experience, the unspeakable. It has many names, but we have been butting our heads against it and gathering ourselves. There was an attempt in the 60s. It was premature. It's like one of those contractions where you say, it's coming, the baby's coming, it's coming. And it doesn't come because the contractions fade away, and it turns out, no, maybe the next set of contractions will break the baby. And that's where we are now. And we need to learn from the 60s and from the past. But I think psychedelics are central to our cultural evolution. And I think that's obvious because mind is central to our cultural evolution. If the expansion of consciousness is not what the future is about, well then what kind of future is it going to be? Is it going to be a progressively more brutish, regimented, fascist, mechanistic, organized, and totalitarian future? I fear so. If we don't honor the mind, celebrate diversity and complexity, and psychedelicize ourselves in an attempt to live as your question implied and I responded, you can predose with the MAO inhibitor and then take the tryptophan. What we developed in the Amazon that we really enjoyed doing was taking mushrooms and about 2 hours into the mushroom trip, smoking the bark of Banisteriopsis tapi, smoking the bark of the ayahuasca plant. Well, that contains an MAO inhibitor. And if you just took a couple of drags of this MAO inhibitor with your system saturated with psilocybin, it would immediately dial up the brightness of the hallucinations, and for about 25 minutes. And then it would go back to the normal level, and then you could take another hit, and then do it again. You could do this 5 or 6 times in the course of the night. We call this vegetable television. And it was wonderful because the hallucinations were very powerful, three-dimensional, highly engaging, but not overwhelming. I mean, there are 2 kinds of hallucinations, at least. I mean, there are more than 2, but I want to distinguish 2. There's hallucinations that you look at, and there are hallucinations that you become. And one turns into the other. You know, if you take a high dose of psilocybin or ayahuasca or DMT, first you see the hallucination, and then you become them. I think this thing I described on Salvia Divina, where I said I was not only seeing weird stuff that was coming up behind me and beginning to mess with my mind, that's the beginning of the hallucinations leaving the realm of something we look at and
Whoa, shit, 1 minute left, okay. Alright, well, I'll sort of lose light outside too. Getting dim on the left side. Here, we still got a minute left, so I guess I'll zoom in and pan around over what we've just accomplished there. That was a pretty good blending session, detailing most portions of the composition. The slower left will become more aquatically detailed with ripples and such. I'll detail the mountain cabin scene with more fog and then relayer it to make the fog deeper and wispier, like in the saturated bright turquoise blue around the dog's head and mouth now. It defines his head a little more clearly. Creepy woman, torso room, razor blade mutilation thing. Lover scene, now illuminated with a lamp, a little more clearly. Red rocks, shadowed, re-skied. Didn't really get too much detail on the tree tiers, but we did do the asylum ward room with a little shadow and light. And this bottom right hand figure. But I got 15 seconds left on this memory clip, so that's it for the moment. Thank you for watching. That's Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Ranch in Taos, Mexico, working on oil painting memories present. Have a good night, Earth.